When I was 10 years old, I was sexually abused by my step-granddad. The thing with my step-granddad is half the time he would do it when no one was in the room, half the time he would do it when people were in the room. Then my dad says to me, right, son, don't tell anybody about this. Don't go to school, don't tell your friends, don't tell the teachers. And only after his death, and we were best friends as well, we were very, very close. And it was only after his death I found out that he was abused too. Find forgiveness. Because you're not forgiving that person for what they done to you. It actually has nothing to do with them whatsoever.
I mean, I understand that. Like, I'm someone who says forgiveness isn't needed, but I think it's important to define forgiveness.
And then they brought her in to what the foster home actually was, which was a satanic cult. Break the silence, first to yourself, then to others. And if you know somebody who's living in silence, just give them the same message.
So, Mr. Perry Power, welcome to the Edge of the Bed podcast. You are my second guest in the studio. We've had 2 male survivors in a trot, which is amazing. What we're trying to do here is open conversations for young guys specifically. So it's amazing to have you on, and yeah, just thank you so much.
Ryan, thank you for reaching out. And I think I actually saw you. I can't remember. I know a survivor who I follow, but I follow quite a few, so I can't remember which one specifically. But a survivor shared you and somebody else on his story. And then that's how I found out about your podcast, and I found out about your story, and I found out your Instagram page. And yeah, I love what you do. Whenever you're a survivor and you're speaking out, one, for yourself continuously, and two, for other people, other victims living in silence, I think is a great thing to be doing. So I want to start this off by appreciating what you do.
Oh no, thank you. Yeah, and you too. Yeah, I really appreciate what you do. I can't even remember how I came across your page as well. But everything, I love how vulnerable you are. I love how much you go into your story and everything like that. Yeah, so same, right back at you. Thank you. So I start my podcast off right with a bit of an odd question, and it may make you feel like you're on the spot a bit, but that's good because I feel like when I ask it on the spot, it makes people sort of think about it more, and we get to know a little bit about you instantly. So, right. If you was a teddy bear, right, and I'm talking about them teddy bears that have, the ones that you press on the chest, and they usually have like 3 phrases that they say, yeah?
Uh-huh.
So, like, if you go to build a bear, you can choose what phrase you put in them. Okay, so if you were a teddy bear, Mr. Perry Power, what 3 phrases would you say would be the only 3 phrases that you could say?
Right. The first three that come to mind would be more affirmation style. So it would be, you have the power. See what I've done there? You have the power to do what you want. It's the first one. The second one is, you are enough. And the third one, and the reason why I make the third one break the silence is what I say. My whole message is break the silence. My book is break the silence. My TED talk was break the silence. Everything is break the silence, break the silence. For 2 reasons, right? One, because it relates to everybody who has been sexually abused, who is being sexually abused. Break the silence because I live in silence. But then also, if I want to just for a second expand that out, everybody can relate to break the silence. They don't have to have been sexually abused. Everybody can, whether it was the bully at school, whether it's the fact that they cheated on their grades, right? Whether it's the fact that they cheated on their messes, right? Like, for example, it could be absolutely anything, but they can relate to break the silence. So my third one from the teddy bear is going to be break the silence.
Amazing. That'd be one good teddy bear to have. I think you'd be waking up feeling empowered every day, wouldn't you, if you had one of them?
Oh yeah, there's no way you can't.
Yeah, I love that about the way you tell your story. You focus on breaking the silence in that TED talk you did, and on your TikTok. I see that so much, and I find it really interesting. But we'll go into that a little later. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and just ask and just give you some space to share your story, a brief bit of your story, just so people know who may not have come across your story, just so they know a little bit more about you. Yeah. So go ahead.
Sure. So, born and raised in West London, in Chiswick. I'm an actor. I have been an actor since I was a child. And I still am. One of the things which I'll go into later, one of the things that I am working on is the movie for Break the Silence and help shine a light on intrafamilial abuse. Kind of like, have you seen Spotlight?
I haven't. No.
Okay, so everybody in the entire world should watch it, but especially if you've been through sexual abuse, that like you should not let another 24 hours go by without seeing Spotlight. It won Best Picture. It won a lot of awards. And that film is basically about the Boston Globe I believe it was in 2001, where it's like Mark Ruffalo and Michael Keaton, a few good few actors in there. And basically what happens is they get a case of a Catholic priest molesting a child in a church, right? And then as they go into that case, they realize that there's been multiple cases, but they keep on getting covered up, right? And then as they dive into it, because they had the balls to do so, they realize that it's a whole underground bloody empire of Catholic priests all around the world molesting children, right? And I want to do the same thing, but shining a light on intrafamilial abuse, sexual abuse that happens within the family. Now, the reason why I want to do that and why I do everything that I do now is because when I was 10 years old, I was sexually abused by my step-granddad. Now, it happened for about a year and a half. And when it was happening, I didn't realize it was a thing that was happening, so to speak. I thought it was just a form of expression, a form of love that my step-granddad was giving me that no other family member were giving me. So I didn't see it as anything bad, because we're talking when I was 10, right? So I'm nearly 27. So we're talking nearly 17 years ago. Sexual abuse wasn't a thing on the TV, right? It wasn't in the newspapers. It wasn't in the magazines. So therefore, it wasn't this type of topic where loads of people know about it and they know right from wrong. So I had no idea, right? So it was just going on between me and my step-granddad. And then it got to a point where a lot of people ask, like, how did it stop? Well, it stopped because the thing with my step-granddad is half the time he would do it when no one was in the room. Half the time he would do it when people were in the room. Right?
That's quite rare to see. Usually abusers are very, very discreet, aren't they? So, you know, it is, you rarely see that.
Yeah, I think, so I've talked to a lot, like I'm talking, it's probably in the thousands now over the last 4 years of victims and survivors of abuse, people living in silence, people who have broken it, people who are still going through it, people who went through it. And for those who have shared with me the specifics of what happened to them, the environment that it happened in, it's usually a reflection, not all the time, but it's usually a reflection of what the abuser went through, right? So what I figured out, really reflecting on this and from all of the people I've been speaking to and finding out my step-granddad's story, is that he essentially, the reason why the Spotlight film hits home as well, because at the end of the movie, before the credits, they list up first in America all of the churches that have cases of abuse, then all around the world, all of the cities that have had cases of abuse, but from Catholic priests. And my step-granddad grew up in Cork, in Ireland, and that was listed. And then I find out that my step-granddad, along with his brother, went to a Catholic boarding school, right?
Wow.
And he was raped, he was abused, as well as all the kids there from all of the priests. They'll be chained up to the stairs, they'll be beaten up, they'll be raped, loads of things, but it always happen in front of other people.
Oh,
you see where I'm going with this, right? It would happen in front of the kids. So I think there's an element with my step-granddad. He would do it to me whilst other people were in the room, because it was a thrill for him of maybe being caught. And it was some sense of familiarity because he went through a same or a similar thing with other people in the same room. So he's more comfortable probably from presence of other people, right? So, but with me, when there's people in there, he would do stuff very subtle. Like I was sitting on his lap, we're watching, usually it was Eggheads, we're watching TV. And he would have his hand down my pants, right? And he'd be playing with me, but very subtle. I didn't think anything. I just thought, just didn't think anything of it.
Yeah, you don't like, in my experience, what happened to me, I was sexually abused in the shower. I just thought this must be what just happens. That's how you take it. So yeah, I can completely understand that.
How do you know there's any other way until you know there's any other way? Like, do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And kids just go along with what adults tell them. Kids just go along with that. So
of course. They're impressionable, and because the adults are meant to be the heroes in their story, right? They're meant to be the guides, so it makes sense. And when my step-grandma was doing it to me on a sofa, my stepmom was in the room, and she was watching TV. My step-granddad had his arm over the arm of the sofa, his free arm, smoking a roll-up cigarette, but the cigarette fell out of his hand onto the carpet. My stepmom catches it out of the corner of her eye. She didn't take anything notice of it. But then he doesn't pick up the cigarette. She's looking at cigarettes burning a hole in the carpet. And she's like, well, why is he not picking it up? And then she looks up and she sees his hand on my pants. And then she darts up. But because she was only like a year or two into our family, no, she wasn't more than a year or two. She was about 5 or 6 years into family. But a couple of years into it from marriage, right? So she didn't want to straight away be like, what are you doing? She calls me out of the room. She takes me home. She tells my dad. Then my dad says to me, right, son, don't tell anybody about this. Don't go to school. Don't tell your friends. Don't tell the teachers. Keep this at home between these four walls. And at the time, I was pissed at him. Not because he told me to keep it a secret, though. I was pissed at him because he wasn't now allowing me to go around my nan's house to see him. So I still didn't. My dad now became the villain in the story, right?
Yeah.
So, which you can imagine from his point of view, why is my son being pissed at me when I'm trying to protect him? But I still didn't get it. And then the years go on, and I'm getting older throughout my teenager years, and I'm starting to see what sexual abuse is. And I start to realize, okay, that was wrong. But now as I start to realize, that was wrong, I then start to realize, well, hold up a second. I went through that for 1.5 years. I must have enjoyed it, right? Perry, you must have enjoyed it. Why would you let go for 1.5 years? Why would you now say that your dad's a prick because he's the one that wouldn't let you go around your nan's house? So, dude, you're to blame here. And then as those thoughts start to seed into my brain, they start to grow into shame. They start to grow into self-hatred, right?
Yeah.
And as I said, I grew up in London. So those thoughts kind of became my identity. And I was the guy I was a virgin. I didn't have any girlfriends. I didn't have to speak to girls. I didn't have many guy friends. I just had my.
And this was what, like late high school you speaking?
Yeah. So this was 14, 15, 16.
Okay. Yeah.
So 15, 16 years old, roughly, coming up to what, year 10, year 11. Yeah. And that was me. Now, my step-granddad passed away about 2 years after the abuse happened from a heart attack. And then
sorry, during that time, after your dad had told you to be quiet, did you ever see him again, or did you see him distantly? Or did you never even see him once?
Never saw him. So, like I said, my dad, I would see my nan sometimes because she used to work at checkout in Sainsbury's. So I sometimes would go and see my nan at work, but I was never ever allowed to go around the house again.
And your nan was never aware of any of what he'd done.
Well, that's a different.
Okay.
I'll
go on. Yeah. Okay. I'll yeah. I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
And the thing with my answer to that, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to, right? So right. So my nan then passed away about 2 years after my step-granddad passed away. So, or 3 years, probably when I was about 15. Then my dad does up her house. They sell the house. My dad gets half of the money from the house. My auntie, his sister, gets the other half. My auntie stays in London. My dad and my stepmom was like, right, with this money, let's move out of London so we can actually buy a property. So then we move out to Bracknell in Berkshire. And I remember I was like, okay, well, I'm coming to this area. And now I'm going to be coming to college here. Okay, doing acting. I was like, but nobody knows me here. None of the students know me in this college. So it's a fresh start. And I was like, well, I'm an actor. I want to create a character. And I remember this clear as day. And I created Perry Power 2.0. Now this guy has slept with loads of girls. He's hella confident, right? He's the life of the party. He doesn't give a fuck about anything, right? Just all those qualities that I idolize whenever I watch American movies and I'm seeing the jocks, right? I took that character. I was like, I'm going to become that character. So then I came to the college and then I was that guy. I just faked it. I faked it until I made it. And then I started to become that person actually in real life, right? And it was all great. I say all great. It's all great until the point where I go off traveling with my girlfriend at the time. We come back. We then get our first house. We move into our first house together. And then Lewis Howes brings out a book called Masculinity. Have you read that?
I haven't, no.
So the Masculinity, Lewis Howes basically says that there's multiple, I can't remember, I think it's like 11 or 12 masks that men wear, right? And you might have the alpha male mask. So when you're with your lads, you need to be the dominant one. right? So
Yeah.
you're in that alpha mask. But when you're not with your lads anymore and you're at home, you take that mask off and you put on a different mask. So you're
Mm.
always wearing these different masks depending on the situation, the environment that you're in, to
Yeah.
basically be the guy. And when he articulated it in a way, I remember his interview on Oprah. No, not on Oprah, but Ellen DeGeneres. And it just happened to click with me in
Mm-hmm.
such a way where it made me realize, like, okay, it wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily a character that I created. It was these masks that I started to wear
Mm-hmm.
in around the women, around the men in business environments. And it was
Yeah.
these
See,
masks.
it's odd because I never sort of dealt with anything like that. I've never been someone who's felt like I've like had to prove myself. I did go through a stage that I've spoke about on the show before, where I felt like I had to. So I started training jujitsu and
Yeah,
martial arts to try and feel like manly, to try and feel, masculine after what happened to me. My abuse went on till I was a little older, so it started to fade out when I was about 13, 14. So that's like in like them key stages of where you start to become a man, I guess. You
yeah,
know what I mean? So it was like I feel like that had a massive impact on me. So for me, it was kind of the opposite. I was always aiming towards being this person who is all masculine and you know what I mean. I was never that, but and then I started doing jiu-jitsu, started doing MMA, and then that made me realize that it's not important. Like it's not important for me to act a certain way or to sort of be this alpha male or anything like that. And that's what that did for me. When you're going in a gym and there's little tiny little old men who can submit you or tap you out, you know what I mean? It just makes you lose all of that ego and all of
yeah,
that,
yeah,
bravado. So that was massive for me. And yeah, I think guys like you said will get into that stage of wanting to prove themselves and it can be dangerous and because they're not being vulnerable, they're not sharing what's actually going on inside.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
that, and I'm guessing that's
How
what
long ago
was
was
going
that? How long
when
ago
I
was that when you?
when I started training.
Well, and then when you had that realization.
Um, Probably in the last year, to be honest.
Yeah.
In the last
Okay.
year, I had that. It doesn't matter. I'm just gonna be vulnerable, and I'm gonna, sharing my story was part of that. Like, are people? My worry was always: are people gonna think I'm weak, or are people gonna think I'm less manly? Are people gonna think about the actions that actually happen, which is a big worry for most survivors. And then when I let go of that, and I thought I'm gonna be vulnerable, and I'm gonna show that exterior wise, you don't have to be this strong alpha male type. You can just be yourself. You can be vulnerable and still, you know, be a man, I guess. You know what I'm talking? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree, and that's something, same realization that I had when well, there was multiple different moments, but it started with that book, with the message that Lewis gave out about the masks. And then when I realized about the mask that I had been wearing, I was like, okay, well, how can I rip this mask off ASAP? I was like, well, the only way I can do that is tell my girlfriend at the time who's finishing work, babe, the guy who you got with, this proper player, wasn't really a player, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a persona. You fell for a fake, you fell for a fraud. And
Yeah.
then tell her about the abuse. And we went on a walk with our dog, and I told her, and it was crazy. So that right there was actually the first time I broke my silence, was to my girlfriend at the time. And she welcomed me with open arms. And it's crazy because I think when you live in silence for so long, you start to create a picture in your mind of what the world is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
and the world to you is, well, either people won't be able to relate to me, people think I'm a freak, people will think I deserved it, and all of those thoughts are just these thoughts are just lingering in your own mind because our mind is just a reflection. Well, sorry,
Yeah. And when just curious, like for me, when I look back, I'm like, what were I thinking? Like, no one's ever gonna think of a survivor that way, and it's so weird that you're like caught in that mind frame, and yeah, it's an odd thing to look back on.
yeah, and it's the thing. It's like when you're in that bubble, you don't know you're in the bubble. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Because you think that's your world. You
It's
don't
just your
know that you
reality,
have
yeah.
exactly. You don't know that you have a choice to step outside of that bubble. And there's many different bubbles you can step into that
Yeah.
are full of more abundance and positivity. And I when I told my girlfriend that, I then went to a business mastermind conference probably about 3 months after that. And then there was 5 people there. It was me and 5 other business guys. And And then when they went around and said, right, well, introduce yourself, I then spoke out and told my story again. And it was the same welcoming. And then it's crazy. I was driving home from that mastermind. I was like, right, I need to tell everyone. So, but I don't want to call up every Tom, Dick, and Harry and be like, mate, I was abused as a kid. This is why I'm fucked up, right? I didn't want to have to tell everybody. I was like, how can I tell it once and everybody knows it? I was like, well, dude, you're on social media all the time. Just put a video out. And I was like, okay, I'll do it when I get home. But as I'm driving home, like, no, because as soon as you get home, you're walking through that door, you're going to fall back into your old bubble. You won't end up doing it because you'll tell yourself and sell yourself a story as to why you shouldn't do it. So when I pulled over, literally when I thought that, I was like, right. And then I put the video on my dashboard, it took me 7 takes. And then I did a video, put it out there about the abuse. And then it literally just kind of went viral. But I think, the interesting thing is that when I put that video out, my family didn't know that the abuse went on for 1.5 years. They thought it happened just that once, which is what my stepmom caught, right? And then what I also found out is that it was me, my cousin, my auntie, and my dad that were abused by the same man growing up, right? So there's 4 of us within the family that were sexually abused, all 4 people. Well, except for my cousin and my auntie. But my dad, nobody knew about my dad except for my auntie, but she kept it to herself, right? So when I realized that, I was like, so my dad was abused by him growing up. That makes sense why he told me to keep it a secret, because he was keeping a secret.
And he's still stuck in that.
He was still stuck.
Yeah.
And my dad became an alcoholic. And in about 2012, 2013, he started to drink more. Then that drinking became to him being very negative. Then he had alarmingly high blood pressure, which led to then having diabetes in January 2017. Then June the 1st, 2017, he has a heart attack and dies. And he was 48 years old, young, right? And only after his death, and we were best friends as well. We were very, very close. And it was only after his death I found out that he was abused too. And when I found out that was when my purpose clicked. And I was like, right, how many other people are out there, especially men, are living in silence because they were abused? And then here's the thing, it makes sense because my dad growing up, he was Cockney. Half my family were Cockney people. So you're a geezer, right? You're a geezer, you're a lad. So my dad always had this really, really masculine, I'm a man, right? And I remember once I'll keep it short, I got mugged in a park when I was like, I think I was 13, right? And then when I went home to tell my dad I just got mugged, my dad took a baseball bat, turned his rings around, went out into the park to a group of 15 kids and said, which one of you just mugged my son? And that kid wasn't there, right? He goes, if you ever see him again, tell him that he's a dead man. We come home and I'm just walking behind him, just picturing this. At the time, my hero is this man. This is how you control the situation, right? We get home, walk into the kitchen. He turns around and looks at me and goes, don't you ever let somebody treat you like that again. And I was mugged, right? So he set this tone of what masculinity is. And then kind of similar to you. And then I grew throughout life and then realized through my own errors, my own teachings, that that's not what being masculine is.
And that goes back to what we were saying before, like realizing what it means to be masculine. If it's not even important to be masculine, like what even is that? You know what I mean? Like why do we need that label of being masculine? I feel like it's a destructive thing to have. Just be the person you are inside. And it's difficult for survivors because as people, we are who we are because of our past experiences. We are a collection of our past experiences. That's what shapes us, And that's what any, psychologist will tell you. Well, most psychologists will tell you. And so it can be really difficult when all you've known all your life is, you've got to be this strong guy. You can't speak about your emotions. And, I'm not saying it's a bad thing that your dad taught you. Obviously, it's not at all because that's what he's been brought up with. It's a generational thing. And obviously his experiences has probably led him to shut down over his life and think, I don't want to feel that weak again. And that's another common thing for male survivors, the fear of feeling weak again.
Yeah. I mean, it makes complete sense, especially as a male survivor, when our most intimate, our most intimate and vulnerable part of us is our personal space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if that is invaded by another male,
Mm.
then that can destroy us if we allow it to. And that's a
Yeah.
key word, isn't it? Is allowing it to. So
Yeah.
it's just,
And did the sort of, what are the sort of things that you've struggled with as being a survivor? Like, you know, have you struggled with dissociation or problems with? Obviously, you spoke about the problems you had growing up and putting on that bravado and the masks. But has there been anything else that you've sort of had to battle through from being a survivor?
I think, I think most of the things were before I went on a journey of breaking the silence and starting to heal. I think most of the things were before that. You know, I've never had a problem with dissociation. My problems were this false sense of identity and having to be something more than what really I should have been. You know, I
Yeah.
think, and that's really it. I think, but once I flipped the script, I and I speak to I come from a place of understanding, and I think it's very hard to do that for a lot of people, right?
Mm.
I say in my book that one of the biggest themes is forgiveness. And when somebody's like, how on earth could I forgive? For example, I'll throw a story at it. How on earth can I forgive my uncle who raped me 12 times?
Yeah.
How can I forgive him? I can't forgive him. And I completely understand where you're coming from. And whilst there's a lot of people out there in professional situations who say you don't need to find forgiveness, me personally, in my story, I'm like, listen, if you want to listen to me, this is my advice: find forgiveness, because
Mm.
you're not forgiving that person for what they've done to you. It actually has nothing to do with them whatsoever, right? So that person's like, how can I forgive my uncle? You're like getting tense because you're like, if I forgive him, that means I'm letting them off the hook. I'm giving them a get out of jail free card. But it's got nothing to do with them. It's got everything to do with the person who's looking back at you in the mirror. You
Yeah.
find forgiveness that allows you to move forward. And the reason why I'm saying this is because you say, is there anything that I struggle with from it? And whilst there are some things beforehand, there's also been some things after, trying to get a message out of find forgiveness, come from a place of understanding. That's also a struggle in its own right, because I'm dealing with a lot of people like, how dare you say that to me, because that shouldn't be the case. But gaining an understanding is what allowed me to find out that my step-granddad grew up in a boarding school, was raped, right, was abused, and
Mm.
then decided to not heal the wounds himself, but inflict that pain onto others. But I was only able to find that out once I came from a place of understanding.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I understand that. Like, I'm someone who says forgiveness isn't needed, but I think it's important to define forgiveness. So, the common term forgiveness means you are letting go of the demons of the past with a certain person, so you can rebuild that relationship. Okay, that's what the term forgiveness usually, equates to. That's what, yeah. But what we're speaking about is letting go of resentment, and letting go of, I guess, the hatred and everything you feel towards that person, but not in a way that what they did to you, you can't acknowledge it was wrong. It was wrong, and and the kind of person they are, you can still acknowledge that. And I think that part is important to get through. But in terms of, saying like, oh, I'd go and have coffee with that person now, like, I don't. That was obviously
Yeah,
never needed, and I don't
no,
think anyone should do that anyway. Like,
no,
never rebuild a relationship with an abusive person ever.
no. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that part is not needed for
Yeah.
sure, because that can cause a lot of damage to the victim, to the
Yeah, of
survivor,
course. Yeah, yeah.
big time.
So it is important to like define forgiveness, because people hear that and they all go, "Oh, how dare you say that to me? I don't want to, I don't want to ever
Yeah,
meet that. I don't want to see that person. I'm not going to forgive them, whatever." And that's not what we're saying when we say that. So yeah, but still, I feel like even if you don't want to go through that process, because it takes, to forgive someone, it does take an actual effort to go through that. And if you choose not to do that, then that's okay. That's your journey, and I don't think Perry or I would ever tell you to do that. But like Perry said, you know, you think that it is something that's helped you and something that you would suggest, right?
yeah, exactly. I would never tell anybody to do anything, because the steps that I have taken doesn't mean it's the steps that you should take. Like I say, so my biggest message is, as we've already established, is break the silence. Now, whenever I say break the silence, somebody hears my story, they hear the message, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm guessing because Perry broke his silence to his girlfriend at the time, I need to break my silence by telling someone. And this is where I'm saying, no, right? Breaking the silence can come in any form. And my message is break the silence to yourself first and then to others.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about that. I saw that on your TikTok. I think that is such an amazing angle to come at it. And, you know, because people live, you know, they live in that stage of, well, I have anyway, I can't speak for everyone, but where you're in this denial where you're like, was it really that bad? Or did this really sort of happen? You don't want to tell yourself it happened because you're scared of what's that going to bring up? What's that going to feel like? What's that going to, you know, what's that going to do to yourself? So yeah, I really loved that part. And I love the different methods you explain. If you want to go into that, like the ways that people can, you know, break their silence to themselves.
Yeah. So there is an endless ways to break your silence. You can journal it, write it because here's the thing, it's not about the method. And this is something very, very key. It is really, really not about the method, because there's an endless amount of methods. You know, the method of how you do it is kind of like the end result. It's a process, but it's about putting the emotions at the forefront and then allowing your emotions to unlock that cage that you locked that cage up 15 years ago and you threw away the key, right? Find that key, unlock it, then allow your emotions to flow through the activity. So for example, journal, you could actually write it out. You can tell yourself in the mirror. You're still breaking the silence to yourself first, because there's power in words. You're speaking out into existence. Another one that I love, I went to an art fair, I think about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And my favorite one is about art, because I love art. And if you look at a painting, so you've got a canvas on a wall, you have a look at this painting, and it just looks like a random splash of different colors. It's like this art, you know, this artist has got paintbrush and just splash it all over, and you're just looking at it and you're like, what on earth is that? Right? Yeah. A lot of people do. I'm not saying I do, but a lot of people are like, what on earth is that? Usually paintings like that have like a £50,000 price tag, and then like, well, what on earth is this? Right? And they're like, that's not art. And then look at something else of like a beautiful landscape, and then like, that's art. But here's the thing, how do you not know that painter, that artist, was living in silence for 22 years? And the way that they broke their silence to themselves was through allowing their emotions to be unleashed onto what was a blank canvas, right? Yeah. So if you can take that example and just relate it to what maybe you're good at, right? It could be writing a song, it could be journaling, it can even be going to a gym and punching a punch bag. Now, why? Yeah. Because you're allowing each punch to be a single strain of emotion that you have had locked inside of you. And then it's about, right, taking steps of breaking the silence to yourself first, and then breaking it to somebody else on step 100, rather than that being step 1.
Yeah. Right. Just accepting that this did happen is, you know, it is really important. We've come to the part in the podcast where I look through your Instagram and we check out a few things that are in your bio. And, you know, we just have a little bit of a conversation about it. So I picked out a few things and you've touched on it already, but you are a best-selling author, it says. So I just want to know kind of like what that process was like writing the book, bringing up all those memories back. And yeah, just what was that like getting that down on paper?
Yeah, so the book was an interesting one. I've always been a writer. I've written just different things over the years, and it came to the first lockdown. So when Corona became a thing, we went into the first lockdown here in the UK. I kind of hit a point where I just didn't feel like I was chasing after my purpose. I wasn't acting much. I wasn't doing much with my story, and I wasn't doing much with other people's stories. So then I left my old business. I had a business called Fit Story with my business partner, and I left it because it was just out of alignment. And I was like, okay, what should I do? I then wrote a feature film script, right? And I wrote that. I was like, okay, what's the next thing I should do? We all had a lot of time in our hands, I can imagine, in the first lockdown. And then I was like, okay, well, whilst I'm thinking about it, it was in the evening, I went onto Netflix. Jeffrey Epstein's documentary was just on there, right? I'm pretty sure it was Netflix. And I was 2 or 3 episodes in, and I was watching this, and I'm just crying, not crying because I don't get emotional in any way when it comes to reflecting back on what I went through. I get emotional when I'm witnessing other people in pain from what they went through, right? That's what triggers me big time. And I was watching this documentary, and these girls were just crying because they're saying that they were just trapped in this silence for so many years because they're just a nobody who lives on a street on Nowhere Village. We've got Jeffrey Epstein, who's worth $1 gazillion, who's connected with every powerful person in the world. Who are they to go up against him? So they will do what he says. And then I was like, Jesus, I said, I've got to do something. Because prior to that, right, I'd already been sharing my story consistently since 2017, consistently. Because I wrote this book last year, right? So I've been sharing my story for 4 years now consistently. And I went onto TikTok and I went viral on TikTok. So my message, and I say this not for vanity, just to show you how this message resonates. I grew very quickly to over 100,000 followers on TikTok, to over 2 million likes on TikTok. It started off with my story, then I went to my dad's story, living and dying in silence, and it just went completely viral. I think that video is sitting at like 5.5, nearly 6 million views now.
Yeah. And just how does it feel to know that that many people have seen your story and probably most of them related to that story and maybe even gone on to be inspired by you and speak up from seeing that short little clip on TikTok? How does that must feel like incredible, but also a little bit daunting knowing that that many people have seen your face and heard all that?
It got daunting when so the reason why I went on it very quickly is because I've been speaking to a lot of adults who are in their 20s and 30s who breaking their silence to me. I was like, okay, but I want to try and hit the people that's a lot earlier than that. So, well, that's kids and teenagers. And at the time, that was the only demographic on TikTok, 1.5 2 years ago. About 2 years ago, I went on TikTok. And then when I started to do those videos, because you can't DM people on TikTok unless they're following you, I then started to get loads of DMs on Instagram. And when I mean loads, in the prime of my account rising, I would get literally anywhere between 5 and 20 DMs every single day for nearly a year.
Wow.
Right? And that's no exaggeration. It was crazy. To begin with, it was like, oh, this is amazing. My it's resonating. I was in my Instagram DMs nearly all day, every day. And it was okay because it was during lockdown. I wasn't doing anything else.
Yeah.
But then it got to a point where I got this one message where it was from this person who was living at home with her mum and her uncle. And the uncle was raping her and abusing her, whilst the mum was burning out cigarette butts in her. Right?
Wow.
And she was going through it. And she asked for, she just told me, she's like, I'm going through this, right? Any words you have would be great. That's all she said. And I remember reading it, and then that was when it hit me. And I shit myself, and I didn't reply back to anybody for nearly a month. Now, the reason why is because in that moment when I saw that message, I had this overwhelming burden and what felt like a burden on me, that I needed to be Harry Potter with a magic wand and just solve her situation, right? But then I realized I don't have a magic wand, and I realized I can't solve a situation. And then I really beat myself up that I should be doing more, right? I should be doing more. So now I stopped replying back to everyone. And I was meditating about a month after that. And as I was meditating, I asked myself a question. I was like, when you shared your story, was you sharing it for a reaction, or was you sharing it for yourself? I was like, I was sharing it. And then I was like, no, I was sharing it for myself. I was like, and then I asked myself, did it matter what the reaction was from that other person? I was like, well, no, I just kind of just want it to be heard. And when I said that to myself, I was like, oh shit. I was like, okay. And I went back to that one and worked my way through the messages. Like, she just wants to be heard. She doesn't want, right, you need to go do step A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z. She just wants from Perry Power, her older brother figure who's been through what she's been through, because she's been watching his videos on TikTok, and she just wants something from him to be along the lines of, hey, I hear you, I see you, I feel for you, and I'm here if you ever want to talk, and I love you, right? And that was it. And when I said that, That was what she needed to hear. And I said to somebody else, that's what they needed to hear. And then that kind of got me through that sticking point. But it was a crazy, crazy, crazy sticking point. But then that TikTok then was like, okay, well, what else can I do? Then the book came along. And then I wrote the book in about a month. And it's interesting what happened here, because I wrote the book in about a month. And then once I wrote the book, I was like, I need to get it to a publisher, right? I need it to be in all the bookstores. I need it to be the best. But then that perfection, which is just a bunch of insecurities for it to not be right, I sat on that book for nearly a year, not getting it out there. Then I moved location and I was like, dude, what are you doing? And I just self-published a book, and then it just completely just took off by storm. And the book, over 650 copies sold, I got into a lot of press in the Sun, got a TEDx talk. Now I'm turning it into a script. And it's interesting because I wrote the book in 3 parts. Part 1 is my story. Part 2, there's 14 stories in there in part 2 of other survivors of sexual abuse. And then I made a page for story number 15. And that's for the reader. So they can get a pen and they can write their story in story number 15.
I love that. I love that.
And then now they are part of the book. They are the 15th survivor. And then part 3 of the book is steps one can take. There's got questions in it. They've got exercises like the identity shift that they can do to shed their old identity and adopt a new one. And that's all in the book. So it's kind of like a guide for victims of sexual abuse to help them break their silence and become a strong, powerful survivor.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. And so moving on a little bit down your bio to the second thing that I picked out, it says charity co-founder, We Rescue Kids. So I just want you to talk a little bit about what the charity does and how you got involved in that, how that whole thing started.
Yeah, so We Rescue Kids. So there's me and 2 other co-founders. We have Juliet and we have Sam. Now, Juliet, I got into entrepreneurship when I was 20. Well, specifically when I was 21. I was doing bits and bobs beforehand, but all in at 21. Now, when I got in, I joined like a business program. And Juliet was on there as like the star student, right? So she became she lives out in America. So does Sam. Sam's Canadian, but he lives out in America with Juliet. And that's how I became acquainted to her. So we followed each other. And then years went on, she shared her story. Now, I'll say very quickly, Juliet was put as a baby on a doorstep of a foster home. Okay. Now there's a bunch of kids in there. Foster parents took Juliet in and they raised her until she got to a certain age where she can think clearly and make decisions. And then they brought her in to what the foster home actually was, which was a satanic cult. And they had a list of clientele that would come in, and all the kids would either be tortured, cut open, they'll be chained up and raped.
Wow.
Juliet would have to hold her friends down whilst that friend would, so Juliet and the other kids would hold down one kid whilst they were being raped by the man, or they'll be cut open, blood everywhere, right? So Juliet has scars on her and all this sort of shit, right? So she was brought up in a satanic cult. And then this woman came along, her foster mum, and then took her out, but not knowing what the house was, right? And then, so basically Juliet's story is from foster care and satanic cults. And she was like, I need to do something. So she started something like an idea, and she named it after a foster mom after she passed away. And then when she found out my story, and I've told her about the TikTok and the messages and the following, she's like, Perry, we got to do something together. So then that's when we formed WRK, We Rescue Kids. And the big vision of We Rescue Kids is there's 2 halves to it. One half is boots on the ground, and we're intercepting and we're rescuing kids from child sex trafficking rings, from satanic cults, from foster care homes, and we're rescuing them and we're bringing them into our safe homes. That's the first part. Then we have the second part, which is 1 joined to that, but also 2 separate, because they don't need to be in a foster care home to take advantage of the second part. That's providing free mental health care to child survivors of sexual abuse. So we give them a therapist, and we partner therapists up with that child, and we make them heal, positively move on, with a better life, with the tools and resources that they need to positively move forward. The stage that we're at now, we have, which is great, it's a big celebration. Last week we took on because it takes a lot of work to get a charity going. We're in our
I can imagine.
We've just done our first year. So in September, it'll be our first year. And last week we just took on our first 5 kids. So now we have our first 5 kids into the charity. They've already got a therapist, and we're having calls with the parents. And now we're starting the therapeutic process, which will be 6 to 12 months of therapy for each child. And then all of the sponsors and the donors will be getting updates and material about how that child is doing in our care.
Wow, that's amazing, mate. Thank you for doing that. That's incredible work you're doing there.
No, thanks.
So, last little weird question I have for you. Well, one of the last weird questions I have for you. All my questions are usually quite weird. So one thing that's helped me a lot in my healing and journey has been music. And like music's just, it's the main thing that I love in my life. Like, honestly, I don't play, I can play piano, but other than that, I'm not very talented. I wouldn't break out in song right now, but So my question is, what song, or you can name album or artist if you can't think of one, has played a huge role in your life or journey? Yeah, so it can be, like I said, it can be song, artist, or album that's played a huge role.
Oh, can I be cheeky and give 3 answers?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So my whole life, because my dad raised me on him, I went to every, I say concert because he's dead, but like his band still traveled around, and he had a hologram of him. He's Elvis Presley. He's my man.
Okay.
He's my
Nice.
go-to guy. He's my don, right?
Yeah.
So Elvis Presley, there's too many connections to that guy, to his songs, for the art. If I had to give one, it'd be Elvis. There's too much tied to him. But then artists that I came into within the last few years, I'm a big country guy. I love my country music.
Oh, no way. Me too.
Oh, yeah.
Me too. I love country music, man. Luke Combs. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Kane Brown. Yeah.
I'll
let you continue. I get excited when anyone says I like country music. I'm like, oh yeah, come on, man.
Because it's not so many of them.
Yeah, I know.
I can imagine it's like if a guy's driving his Harley, he stops at the traffic lights. This other guy rolls up with a Harley. You look at each other and you just nod, right? Yeah. That's what I see with country music. So country music has been the biggest thing for me. It makes me cry. It makes me laugh. Everything. I tell you what, though, I went through a breakup last year. Don't listen to country music when you go through a breakup, because you find meaning to every word, even if it doesn't really like, do you know what I mean? But like for me, country, my favorite artist is Morgan Wallen. Right?
Oh man, yeah. Whiskey Glasses,
Morgan,
what a tune.
That's it. And his latest album, there's over 30 songs in an album, and it's crazy. But yeah, Morgan and also Lynyrd Skynyrd, but their album Gods and Guns, so that one is a fantastic album to listen to.
Country music is like the genre or whatever, that's still like that's still good. I think it's still good. Like it's not been taunted by like modern life. It's just how it's always been, you know. It's modernized a little bit, the instruments and stuff, but it's still like everything has meaning, and that's what
exactly. Every song is a story, like a proper story, you know. Have you been to a C2C yet?
A what?
The Country to Country Festival at the O2 Arena?
No, I haven't. I need to know. I went to see Dan and Shay, which are like half country, half pop now. I went to see them live. That was amazing. And then we saw them like walking out of the place at the back, so that was really good.
Nice.
Dan and Shay, like the old stuff.
I
love their old stuff more than the new stuff, but I still like the new stuff, obviously. But
I'm a big fan of their old stuff too, because some of their songs they're transitioning. They're doing like a little Taylor Swift, aren't they, in a way?
Yeah, they're going into pop and doing tunes with Justin Bieber and all that. But yeah, amazing stuff, mate. So thank you so much for coming on, Perry. It has been amazing to speak with you. And you know, I said before, but your story's so inspiring, and just continue doing the work you're doing, which I'm sure you will anyway. I don't need to tell you that, but yeah, it's amazing stuff, mate.
No, thanks, Ryan. Thank you for giving me the hour to share my story and share my message to anybody who's listening. If you're still living in silence, break the silence, first to yourself, then to others. And if you know somebody who's living in silence, just give them the same message, whether it's this podcast, it's the book, it's anything. But I think the message holds a lot of power. So anything you can to
Yeah,
spread the message would be
definitely
greatly
does.
appreciated.
Definitely does.